Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. It's fitting that this is called an opening drive. We're going to try to run the ball a little bit here, which LSU did not do very well in the game on Saturday night. I think that's been maybe the biggest talking point here outside of the Marcel Reed insertion into the game is LSU's inability to run the football. And I have done a segment similar to this a handful of times at this point, but we continue to collect more data and more information is available. It furthers the discussion. So we'll do it a little bit more here and illuminate some things. And I do realize fully that when I get into this segment, there are ways that you can manipulate these numbers. And I'm going to try not to do that and be as transparent as I can with the understanding that we're taking some liberties here and there. But it is what it is at this point. LSU goes to Texas A&M and has from the as a whole 23 carries for 24 yards. You're well aware of that number. But I want to take the sack yardage out, and let's just talk about how they're running the ball with the running backs. Well, Josh Williams, 7 carries, 23 yards. Caden Durham, 11 carries for 15 yards. That is 18 carries for 38 yards. That's awful. That's not establishing the run game. That's not even busting one big one and skewing the numbers. That's just poor effort running the ball. No two ways about that. And Brian Kelly met with the media yesterday and talked about the struggles in the run game.
One, A&M is pretty good against the run. Two, a lot of the run game, for us is based upon individual matchups, winning individual matchups. We lost some individual matchups. And then, quite frankly, just making good decisions based upon when we should, throw the ball out and when we should run the football based upon numbers. So similarly to what we've talked about before, those are decisions that are made, post-snap. So when our run game has not gone well, we've lost some individual matchups up front. The quarterback is instrumental in reading, whether he has a loaded box or not. And then when there's an extra hat, making somebody miss. And we just collectively didn't execute at a high level in the running game.
Clearly, and you lost the football game. You also lost the game against Southern Cal in Vegas. And in that game, as in a total, your team had 26 carries for 117 yards. But if you just boil it down to the running backs, you had John Emery with 10 carries for 61 yards. 49 of those came on back-to-back runs, a 39-yarder and a 10-yarder. Josh Williams, 9 carries for 23 yards. Caleb Jackson, 6 carries for 18 yards. That's 25 rushes for 102 yards, which on its face is not terrible. 25 carries for 102 yards is not terrible on the ground. But I would suggest when you carry the ball 25 times and half of your rushing total comes from 2, that is not consistently running the football. Fair? I think that's fair. Hester would tell you can't take this run away, you can't take that run away, and he is right. You can't take them away. They happen. But I would rather a running game that consistently gets 5 yards than one that over the course of 23 carries does nothing and over the course of 2 gets 49. And I think he probably would too. But that's part of the manipulation of the numbers, and I'm telling you right now, I'm trying to be transparent with the numbers. Those are your 2 losses, and in your 2 losses, your running game has disappeared. How about last year at Alabama? How'd your running game do? Well, you had 24 carries for 206 yards. That's pretty damn good. That's real good. However, Jaden Daniels did almost all that. How'd your running backs do in Tuscaloosa last year? Well, Logan Diggs had 8 carries for 24 yards. That's 3 a pop. Josh Williams, 4 carries for 19 yards. That's 4.5 a pop. And John Emery had a carry for nothing. You had 13 carries for 43 yards from your tailbacks. That's not good enough. Not even close. And yes, Jaden Daniels helps with all that. But in terms of the actual running game, nothing doing in that loss. So we've gone over the last 3 losses for the program, A&M, USC, and Bama. Go back one more, running game did fine. LSU ran all over Ole Miss. I'll talk about that in a second. But then if you back it up 4 weeks prior, you played Florida State, and in that game, your tailbacks had 12 carries for 49 yards, and Josh Williams had a 39-yarder. So you had 11 carries for 10 yards in the others. Your running game did nothing against Florida State outside of one Josh Williams run right before halftime. Y'all have heard me talk about this before, but these are the facts. LSU, when they play really good fronts, doesn't run the ball. But that is not to say that LSU flat cannot run the football. It's not. LSU can't run the football against the good fronts. There were times where LSU couldn't even throw the ball against the bad defensive teams. Now, you're going back a decade, but that's not the point with this team. This offense is flawed. It's not anemic. And I can point to this year or last year. Last year, there was a point with these same offensive linemen, save the center, where Logan Diggs got things going. In a 3-week stretch against Arkansas, Missouri, and Auburn, he carried the ball 56 times for 328 yards. That is 6 yards a carry and 109 yards per game. Now, Arkansas, Missouri, and Auburn weren't great teams last year. Missouri won 13 games, but they weren't great on defense. They were good, and LSU took their coordinator, but they weren't Alabama personnel-wise. They weren't Florida State. If you go to Florida, yeah, Jaden Daniels did his thing against Florida. He had 606 yards of total offense. He ran whenever he wanted to. He threw whenever he wanted to. He owned Florida that night. But Josh Williams, John Emery, Noah Cain, and Caleb Jackson had 22 carries that night for 96 yards, and they didn't bust any. The long that run that night was 14. It was a consistent rushing attack. And certainly, I can grant you that the running game is different and has a different edge to it when you have the threat of Jaden Daniels running it and not. But it's the same offensive lineman, and they were creating holes for running backs. This year, Caden Durham ran for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns at South Carolina, and that's the number 3 run defense in league games in the SEC. LSU ran the ball against Arkansas. Durham had 101 yards against Arkansas. Texas A&M's got the best run defense in the Southeastern Conference. Ole Miss ranks 6th, and you didn't run it great against them. But you see what's coming up here. You've got Alabama, you've got Florida, you've got Vanderbilt, you've got Oklahoma. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Florida's run defense is 15th out of 16 in league games. Oklahoma and Vanderbilt are ranked 8th and 9th against the run. And Oklahoma's going to be coming in here after they face Alabama, which is going to be a physical game in Norman. Those teams are not great run defenses, and it stands to reason that LSU very well may be able to run the ball on them like they did on Arkansas, like they did on South Carolina, like they did in the second half against UCLA. I think that's very possible. And you say, well, what about Alabama? I go, okay. Alabama hasn't looked great against the run. South Florida ran for 206 on 46 carries. Vanderbilt ran for 166 on 54 carries, but they stuck with it. South Carolina ran for 132 yards on 39 carries. Tennessee ran for 214 on Alabama. Missouri, with a terrible quarterback back there after Cook came out. I realize it was a blowout, but 167 yards on 39 carries. There's that. You could say that Missouri ran it on them because it was a blowout and Alabama quit caring, but what about the other 4? Bama hasn't been awesome against the run. They just haven't. So now the conversation shifts to, can you win the rest of your games? If you can't win the rest of your games, then who cares? I don't care about the ReliaQuest Bowl. I don't even know what the other bowls are anymore. I'm dead serious. I don't even know. The Belt Bowl's still around? Not sure. I don't know if the SEC's got a tie-in, if the Gator Bowl's still here. I honestly have no idea. I've completely tuned out the bowls. At this point, I'm here to say, can you make the playoff or can you not make the playoff? And the only way to make the playoff is to win the rest of your games. And the only way to win the rest of your games is to continue to score some points. And LSU is scoring points. You're talking about a team that at Texas A&M, against one of the best defenses in the conference, had 17 first-half points with 2 missed field goals, and it had 283 yards of offense. It's not hard to multiply by 2. That's 34 points and 560 yards of offense. If you do times 2. You had a really good first half. You had a terrible second half. You can run the ball and have for a year and a half on average run defenses, bad run defenses. When you play the big boys, you don't. And if LSU has to play Georgia, if LSU has to play Ohio State, if LSU plays Ole Miss again, like, they won't play Ole Miss again because that's not going to happen. But if you play the big boys, you're in trouble running the football. But guess what? Oklahoma's not. Vanderbilt's not. Florida's not. Figure out a way to do it against Alabama. Again, this is a flawed offense, not an inept offense, not an anemic offense. They've got to get better at running the ball. I think that it's unlikely they get better at running the ball, but I think it's reasonably likely they can run it against some of the teams left on their schedule. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here. The sample size is so big now that it's unlikely that you're going to transform yourself as far as running the ball goes. But what you've been the last couple of years, it's not like you never run the ball. You just don't run it in the games you lose against the better teams you play. Hopefully, some of that changes against Alabama coming up here a week and a half from today. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.